My name is Weston, and I am a level designer. This is my first real video, and with it, I'd like to share what I believe to be important as a designer. More specific videos will come, especially regarding level design, but I'd like to have a foundation that anyone could reference in order to understand why I tackle certain topics the way I do. Everything I generate from here on out will be dedicated to the idea of integrity, and my belief that the designer should uphold it. So, without further ado, let's begin. When I refer to integrity, I essentially mean a mechanic, level design, weapon, or system in a video game that rewards or punishes a player proportionally to their merit in a given situation. Speaking of, before we go any deeper, we should be careful not to conflate all mechanics that introduce a skill or merit and those of integrity. As a Cursed Lemon expertly explained in his video, 3 Deep, 5 Skill, anything you add to a game will also add something to utilize better than your opponent. But not all of these mechanics will feature integrity, and not all skills are created equal. For the first example, let's look at the original SMG starts in Halo 2. With these settings, the team that won the initial battle of any multiplayer match could then go pick up every weapon upgrade that was placed on the map, effectively making any sort of comeback by the other team impossible, as the starting SMG just couldn't compete with these weapons. And the team who claimed victory can easily guard the weapon spawns in order to keep the snowball perpetually rolling with little effort. They've won the game from winning one fight, and we have to ask ourselves, does that seem okay? Probably not, and in fact, this effect was already solved in Halo 1, where the starting weapon, the pistol, was always able to compete. Anyways, I think our definition of integrity is violated with these starts, as one team is handed a win they didn't earn. Yes, technically, both teams do have the same opportunity to win the first battle. In that way, you could consider this fair. But just because we all have the same opportunity for something, doesn't mean that things aren't over-rewarding once we've received it, because the team without the setup in this scenario, regardless of their merit beyond the first encounter, is basically screwed. For proof, just look up the video Nated Gooses, where Ninja and Nated, two of the best Halo players in the world, lose 25-5 to a couple of no-names. In the very same way, a multiplayer map that features a setup that is sufficiently hard to break will disproportionately reward those within the setup. Again, the question is not whether one takes skill and the other none at all, although I wouldn't really call camping a skill, or if both teams initially have the same opportunities. The question should be, who should win? The player just waiting in Sniper Tower of Halo 2's lockout, or the team who is planning ahead, moving, thinking, and working together? If we are to get what our merit calls for in any given situation as prescribed by integrity, then these examples just don't seem to work. For the third example, we have random spread. In shooters, random spread will introduce a level of unpredictability that can't be played around. It strips us of any sense of accomplishment when the spread of our bullets hits an enemy, as you know that your shots just happen to land in the right spot, while simultaneously, this serves to enrage us when we die, as you know your opponent likely just got a couple lucky headshots that he couldn't have aimed for. This example is especially offensive, as you often get rewarded for things that you don't deserve, and punished in the same way, all within the context of the single most important facet of a shooter, the shooting. The alternative to random spread, guns that shoot straight, allow for intentional and rewarding kills, while dying to someone with an accurate weapon in hand is much less frustrating, as you know he earned it. This may be the single most important example to keep in mind, because this dynamic mirrors that of all mechanics designed with integrity. They are always less frustrating to play against, and they are always more rewarding to execute. Now, for the last of the examples, we'll take on the idea of ultimates in games. The entire idea of a super or ultimate ability has been executed by the industry to essentially mean crazy powerful and on a long cooldown, which usually hand the player free kills with self-aiming projectiles, auto-targeting melees, and sometimes even complete invincibility. But here's the thing. Just because it takes a long time for my enemy's ability to charge, doesn't mean that Soldier 76's ultimate from Overwatch, a literal aimbot, isn't horrendously over-rewarding and impossibly frustrating to play against. Cooldowns can't give an ability integrity in its own right, they just make the ability happen less. We could go on all day with examples like these from modern game design, but whether or not a mechanic features integrity will always boil down to whether or not an honest scale has been baked into our design. Remember, integrity is a mechanic, level design, weapon, or system in a video game that rewards or punishes a player proportionally to their merit in a given situation. Our choice either for or against integrity has more of an impact than just creating an honest scale within our designs, and I would even go so far as to say that these choices can potentially carry with them moral implications. In regards to real-life sport, people hate the idea of participation trophies, or more simply put, rewarding people with things that they didn't earn. Why? Well, on the surface, it's just not fair, and extremely irritating to the people who actually deserve a trophy. But more than that, it can genuinely damage someone's ability to understand the way the world works by defying the way the world works. You get what you earn, and this creates a sense of entitlement. On the flip side of this paradigm, undeserved punishment is just as bad, and people wronged in this way harbor resentment. You'll find no shortage of outrage in the world for things like this: an unfair prison sentence, someone getting fired without explanation, and for dying in PUBG without finding a gun. That may sound a little silly, but these are things we had no control over, and it makes us flip out for good reason. And I'm not trying to say that Battle Royale games are morally comparable to arbitrary life imprisonment, but we're dealing with the definition of injustice. No matter where it comes from, I think its effects are the same, just to varying degrees. Now, obviously not every case of bad behavior could be linked back to false trophies or inexplicable firings, but a parent, soccer coach, teacher, an entire culture, or even a video game that rewards people with things that they didn't earn and punishes them for things they had no control over will create entitled, selfish, and resentful patterns in the people who are exposed to this. And there is no reason to believe that the lessons we learn virtually are psychologically lesser than the games we learn from in real life. And therefore, I believe it's just as important to hold up integrity in a video game than it is in a real game. Real, profound learning experiences come from all sorts of outlets. When you watch a movie or read a book, does the moral of the story seem fake to you? Or is this media instead a source of useful ideas? Of course it is, and people will say as much. It's not controversial to claim that reading certain books can change you as a person. And it's definitely not uncommon to claim that a sport like jiu-jitsu teaches respect, discipline, humility, and perseverance. Yet nobody wants to apply that idea to games, even though that I think the inherently intimate experience of playing a game might even have more of an effect than some of these. Doesn't learning to manipulate the auction house of World of Warcraft teach you something about economics? Can't chess gift the player with the ability to plan ahead and understand the extremely important idea of sacrificing the moment for the future? If a physical game like jiu-jitsu will reform you, why can't a video game do the same thing? And if we then conclude that you can in fact learn positive lessons from games, then it is only logical to assume that we can learn negative behaviors and damage our souls in the very same way. Like a participation trophy, some video games, some we've already looked at, are designed to reward players with things that they didn't earn under the guise that they did earn it. Designers lie to us like this in order to attract players with instant gratification and make us feel like badasses, which then punishes the players on the receiving end for things that weren't earned and can never really create a sense of fulfillment. It's the porn of video game design, a cheap, temporal satisfaction that eventually leaves us feeling empty, and I don't think this is harmless. I'll just say this. There's a good reason that people make videos about how Dark Souls literally saved their life. Right now, I'd like you to pause the video and type into YouTube, "Dark Souls saved me," and just scroll through the results. I did that as I wrote the script for this video, and it almost brought me to tears. Many have learned from the game, one designed with integrity and predictably extreme challenge, that perseverance would allow them to overcome anything. They took that lesson, applied it to their lives, and it worked. Some even say that it prevented them from choosing suicide. A large part of this effect can and should be credited to the story elements, but even the story elements cite integrity. The entire point of Dark Souls is that the only way to truly lose is of your own faculty, to give up and go hollow. Now imagine for a second that From Software designed the game with randomly spawning enemies and unconditional boss movesets in order to keep things fresh as a quote, surprise mechanic. I don't think I have to explain how different things would be, or just how much worse so many people's lives would be without that source of integrity to learn from. And therein lies the moral choice to contend with. We can choose to uphold integrity for the sake of the people who play our games, or we can instead choose to sell our players short with random systems, Destiny-styled supers, and random loot, all in an attempt to imitate the fun of real achievement. And the result of this choice has real effects. For these reasons, I think that games that are made to respect and on a scale tend to create the most mature and stable communities. My own brother was coached by some random StarCraft player a while back, and testified that this person offered to help him get better at the game after they had matched for apparently no reason, and actually went through with it until my brother became a Masters level player. I've heard that this sort of inter-community respect is pretty common in StarCraft, while the game is simultaneously and constantly cited as one of the most merit-awarding games of all time, and I personally know for a fact that not a single mechanic within StarCraft is left to chance. I played Quake for the first time about 2 years ago with a friend, and quickly found out that teabagging and talking trash in chat was for the most part alien to the players of Quake. These people were different, and it made me want to change from the insulting ways I had learned from the Halo community. Of course, there will always be toxic players of any game, but seriously just consider this for a second. Do you often see this sort of charitable behavior in Destiny's Crucible, or any other game that features obviously dishonest scales? Do people message you good game after a match of Super Fiesta in Halo? Do you recall partaking in many happy conversations in the post-game lobby of Modern Warfare 2? Has anyone made any videos about how a game like Halo 5 saved their lives? Is it any coincidence that the games that reinforce and reward obnoxious playstyles harbor obnoxious communities? Do a designer's decisions actually affect people and therefore have real moral implications? Not only do I think designers have much more of an impact on the personal lives of their players than we probably ever realize, but to choose integrity also happens to be the most effective way to create games that last, get people genuinely attached, and listen to this one, EA, it's probably the best way to make money. All of this can be attributed to the same dynamic we saw from Random Spread earlier. Games that feature integrity offer higher highs and higher lows, because it's more fun to earn a win than it is to be handed one, and it's less frustrating to lose as a result of an honest mistake or when the opponent earned it. And you know what? It's not even fun. It's much more than that. It's a completely different kind of experience. It's meaningful. It's the difference between feeling like we're wasting our time playing a game and actually learning something. People like to attribute the success of games to marketing, free-to-play status, content updates, the state of the industry, and so on. And while those things do matter, none of that amounts to anything significant enough to sustain a game. Time and time again we see games flop that do everything right on paper, but just don't offer meaningful gameplay. What truly seems to breathe life into a game is what the design rewards. Unlike what everyone else on YouTube seems to think, this is why a game like Titanfall 2 failed. Sure, you can master course-correcting yourself with the grapple hook in order to build up insane movement speeds and outmaneuver your opponents, but that means nothing when by far the most effective way to play the game is to sit in a Titan or post up a mile back with a DMR and pick off the foolish players who are just trying to have fun with the movement. And these players are only fools because of what the game rewards. The game has made them fools. And I don't know if I could think up a better way to destroy a franchise than to build it around movement and then fail to reward movement in its design. Does it really matter that Rainbow Six Siege isn't free to play, or that it utilizes the so-called outdated match-based multiplayer format, or that it had a lackluster launch for marketing reasons? No, because the game is well made and designed with integrity, and therefore steadily rose in popularity and acclaim through word of mouth alone until it was one of the biggest shooters in the world. Is Apex Legends declining in popularity because of a lack of content? Again, no. It seems painfully obvious to me that if the only reason people will play your game is new stuff, then they will inevitably quit playing the game again once the fresh content smell wears off. More than that, the trend of constant updates is a new one. Until recently, most games launched as whole experiences and added content much later as entire DLC packs. And yet, those games seem to hold onto their player bases longer than the games of today. The game of chess doesn't need an update, and neither does a well-designed video game. Could it be that games of quality and integrity will inevitably flourish, and games packed with randomness and over-rewarding mechanics are destined to fade? Could it be that developers have forgotten why they made games in the first place, as they endlessly chase each other's money trail of trendy modes, loot boxes, and so-called dynamically random systems? Is it possible that a game could survive without an endless stream of content patches that turn a game studio from a place of creativity and into an assembly line that all but kills the employees with the crunch that ensues? For this last section, I feel that it should be stated that abiding by integrity in your design will not create some sort of rigid and intimidating experience like many people, especially developers, seem to believe. Sometimes a designer will hold in their hands something pure, something unique, and decide that it's almost too good, and in an attempt to reel in a casual audience, will drag everyone else down. The problem can be summed up like this. The top and low ends of the potential skill range in a game don't vary independently. One end does affect the other, but not in the way you might think. As we've already demonstrated, the common sentiment is that a game that features a high or limitless ceiling of skill potential via integrity will inevitably push away the casual audience. This is wrong. In fact, the opposite is true. So long as integrity is present, the higher the skill ceiling, the more a newly interested player has to look forward to, and the more he can gauge his improvement and feel good about it, knowing that he is genuinely getting better by his own merit. Which is precisely where the fun lies for players of all interest levels. No matter how good you end up being, it's fun to improve, it's fun to learn, and a designer can only attempt to provide a predictable and unique environment for that fun to catalyze. That's good game design. And in the case that your definition of a casual player is someone who just doesn't care, then I would say that I don't think that person really exists. And even if they did, how am I supposed to design a game around someone who doesn't care? That's like trying to cook a meal for someone who doesn't eat food. With all of that in mind, the last thing that should be pointed out is the tendency for games to fundamentally change for the worse at a high level, which leaves many players with a bad taste in their mouth and makes designers think that the game is just, quote, too competitive. This is not the result of a game that is too competitive or has too much integrity, but a game that breaks as you reach the higher end of player talent as a result of a design that didn't sufficiently account for the exploitative nature of hardcore players. These things can and should be accounted for, and games, if designed well enough around the highest levels of stress, should only get more fun as the players get better. A prime example of this in play is any Fortnite tournament, where you end up with 75 people in a tiny endgame circle, all exploiting the hamster ball vehicle and spam building to stay alive forever. That's not how Fortnite usually plays, and that's not why we liked it in the first place. Whereas in a game like Rocket League, the aggressive and creative skills that make the game appealing to a newer player are only accentuated as players get better at the game, even up to the highest level. As I stated at the beginning, this video wasn't tailored for the teaching of any sort of detailed methods for the implementation of integrity. For someone looking for that information, to hold you off until I make more videos, just constantly ask yourself the following 2 questions. Are my accomplishments a result of my merit, or is it the game handing me a trophy I didn't earn? Are my failures the result of an honest misplay, or is the game punishing me with something I couldn't control? Whether you agree or disagree with anything I've said, you should now know exactly where I stand, generally why I design anything the way I do, and why I take it all so seriously. I can now focus on covering much more specific ideas and applicable theory with videos to come, especially regarding my passion of level design. This is always the goal for me, as I genuinely get annoyed by the substanceless and vague PowerPoints you'll find in your average GDC talk. And if I'm going to continue to make videos like this, I really don't want to be the guy who just repeats keywords with an emphatic tone without really saying anything. So, with that, I hope you enjoyed, and thanks for watching.